Ross, good evening.
Good evening.
How are you, my friend?
Oh, good, thank you.
Very
How about
good.
yourself?
Very good, Ross. Very good. Thank you. Ross, we, of course, have been in contact for quite a while now, a couple of months. And so I have an idea of who you are and of who you work for, but there's probably a few people that don't. So I'm going to give you the floor and allow you to introduce yourself and the company that you work for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ross Charles. I'm the head of IT at Science in Sport. Science in Sport is made up of two main brands. Science in Sport, which is an endurance, performance, nutrition business. So providing gels, performance technology. So Beta Fuel is one of our key products as well, to endurance and elite athletes and teams. So teams like Tottenham, the Milwaukee Bucks, and Team Ineos, who is one of our major suppliers from the past. One of our key ambassadors was Chris Hoy, and he's
Right.
really been around the company for a long time. And then our sister brand, which is PhD. The focus there is really on wellness and strength, and really working with athletes who are, say, adventurers or gymnastics, boxers, people who live in and out of the gym. So there we work with people like Ross Edgley, someone who's obviously really at the cutting edge of performance as well on that side of things. The key bit about both of our brands, we're born from science. Everything we do has a scientific background. It's developed in the John Moores University up in Liverpool,
Yeah.
and that's done by our professional, our professor of data of science. Um, really about the case studies behind it and how everything looks really positive off the back of that. So that's where we work with, say, Tottenham. We do a lot of development with them of their products and what really works for them individually. And
Okay.
that's not something obviously we can do for all our customers, but
Sure.
it really informs then how we make something better. A bit like a Formula One racing team. They develop the different technologies, the little fuels, and then that feeds down into road cars. Same sort of thing with our science.
Okay. So, I have an idea of what Science in Sport does, and I think some people will, but it's interesting that, very much a science company, and, the actual products flow down from that. So I'm thinking, I believe I'm right in saying things like whey protein and
Yep.
supplements on the PhD side. I've was training for a marathon a couple of years ago, and I was using your gels, but I didn't put two and two together. So, there's probably, I'm guessing by the numbers, millions and millions of products that get sold every year. But could you maybe give us an idea of the business by numbers in terms of like geographical locations, employees, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we only have two geographical locations now. We did previously have three or four, but we've consolidated our production and warehouse into a single purpose-built building up in Blackburn, just down the road from where we were founding in Nelson in Lancashire. Our second office is really our marketing and brand-led area, which is in London, and that's our HQ for our board meetings, etc., to introduce them.
Right.
Um, Blackburn is very much the production side of things now. We've only really been operational there for, say, 3 or 4 months. And we've been able to bring in new technologies of how we develop tools and products, and speed up that process as well. We were restricted by space, not so much now, which
Yeah.
means we can reduce our time to make gels down from a couple of days to more like a couple of hours when
Wow.
we're fully operational. So that's really key for us.
Okay.
We're only 215 permanent members of staff.
Wow.
The majority of those work in the production area or in the warehouse. In the London office, we have 50 or 60 people who perform that administration and the brand and trading of the business.
Yeah.
Most of them are the operational quality people that work up in Blackburn.
Okay.
And I think in terms of numbers, we're hoping this year to hit over 3 million sales of gels alone, which would be our biggest year by a long stretch.
Yeah.
And we're really pushing smart bars as well this year to try and get them up to 2.5 million,
Okay.
which would be pretty big growth. Over
Yeah.
the last 10 years, we've grown on average over 20% year on year, with
Okay.
the exception of the pandemic year.
Yeah.
But even then, we still had good positive growth.
Yeah. Everyone was out running and doing exercise, so they needed gels.
Exactly. Yeah, we had a bit of a bad bit where no one could go out and do anything.
Yeah.
It was fun.
But no, it's really interesting because, those brands, they're very well known. And if you go into a supplement shop or even into your general retailers, you can find a lot of those products. So it's interesting to hear that you have a relatively small sized workforce. So that leads me into the question of asking, what's actually going on at the business right now from a technology standpoint. Lots of transformation initiatives always ongoing, I should imagine, but what are the big things that are happening at the business right now?
Absolutely. The Blackburn site was our main technological project in the last 2 or 3 years. We had to move a lot of infrastructure, and the key there was how can we optimize and bring ourselves on for the journey. So that transformation really was, let's get off premise as much as possible. Let's use SaaS products wherever we can, and have that kind of holistic cloud approach in order to enhance business continuity. When I joined the business, we had a lot of challenges with on-premise, very little DR, definitely not been tested for quite some time. So it was, how do we make sure that we know we can operate and continue to operate? So a highly available site, and then the connections in and around that. And also allowing us to plug and play if we need to with certain products, having our key infrastructures and applications, so our website and our ERP, and then picking partners that could be used for warehouse management, and allowing them to come on the journey with us and have that ecosystem for end-to-end sales, where we're kind of almost unique in our industry, in the nutrition industry anyway, is that not only do we design our products, we manufacture them all the way through to distribution and handoff, all within one facility. And that means that we've got a lot of different tech along the line. And it's the automation then of those pieces. It's never going to happen from day one. It's bringing them into management systems, bringing them into IoT as well, because we've got a lot of monitors to make sure the cooking temperature of the gels is at the right temperature, so that we've got the quality of the product. And this all has to be joined together into a single ecosystem whilst keeping it secure. So that has been a pretty major project really for the last couple of years, and it's allowed us to remove the majority of our legacy tech. All that tech debt just brings us to a nice place, stable foundation where we can move in different ways. So I would say from a supply chain perspective and production, we've really nailed that now. The key element now is using data to enhance our services and support, and also to help us identify our customers and where we're missing out, maybe on repeat customers that we should be targeting, or maybe even to the brand level, where how do we help people understand what product they need to use? How can we create that community? How can we create, I guess, a way to integrate into people's lives where we're not getting in the way, but we're like, if you need this, this is what you can have. And I think that's, that data science piece really now is key for us in terms of reaching our customers. And then we've got the automation piece in terms of infrastructure and process. Is something that we're really keen to bring along. When you're stepping up from a small business to a medium-sized business, that governance, the architecture, kind of even down to single approvals, how does that work? It all becomes important to take you to that next level. So we're really pushing ahead with that, and that's one of my key initiatives as a head of IT, because I also look after architecture and project management. It all fits in my remit of how do we deliver that best to the business.
Okay. So busy time.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
So a couple of things that I wanted to pick up on, super interesting, by the way. The thing that sticks in my mind straight away was when you mentioned about the whole data science piece and, repeat business and how you can, garner more insights to, effectively serve your customers. Does that fit or does that sit still within the IT function? Or does that sit within, sales and marketing? Is there a myriad of both? Does it cross over?
Very much crosses over. The way we've taken to it is a split between engineering and insights. So it's that kind of data engineering. How do we get the data from our systems, collect it, pool it into a single location, and that's contextualized, that we can actually get the information out we need, and then a marketing insights function that can take that and understand it. The kind of crossover in the bit that we need to move to is how do we automate those insights so they're quicker, faster, and easier to understand for the marketeers and brand and the rest of the business to get quickly and move forwards, capture those lessons learned from what we've done previously, and overlay that with our forecasts and really understand what's coming next.
So would it be fair to say that the IT is kind of providing the plumbing and the electrics to get all of that data? And then, you know, the light switch, or when you turn the tap on and run the bath, that's what, you know, when marketing comes in to actually garner and make sense of that data.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess if you look in a traditional sense, it's that you're providing the platform. The configuration doesn't have to be us. I think we'll still be heavily involved from an enterprise architecture point. We very much are from that holistic point of view, but we're not the ones turning the cogs.
Okay.
You know, they can let it flow how they want to. You know, it will create the audiences for them, but they select which way to drive that.
Of course. And then on the IT OT piece as well. So you mentioned that there's like a ton of new factory development that's gone on, and, you know, garnering insights from that as well. You mentioned about cybersecurity. Have you had to put maybe new measures in place or new systems to actually deal with that OT and IT security on the production line? Is that something that you've had to specifically focus on?
It's something we will. In the interim, it's that traditional, let's lock it away and put it segregated so we don't have to worry about it. But at the same time, you know, that's been done very much by a hard connection difference. You know, we may have the same firewall, but they go out separate connections and we keep them isolated. But the next step in that evolution is, how do we secure IoT devices? What monitors that? So yes, we have next gen firewalls. Yes, they will do IPS and IDS detection, but there is still an extra layer we need to be looking at. And I think one of the things that's always missed is you can isolate away, but if they can still talk to each other, they're a risk to each other. So it's still an operational network that needs segregation within the segregation. And that's something that we've designed from the get-go. And I think that's the key. If you get your architecture right to start with, your network right, you've got a very good place to start from. And that can give you your perimeter and the kind of the onion skins that help you protect everything. But then it's the awareness piece and the monitoring that is the next level up that triggers when something doesn't look quite right.
I guess it's probably been quite interesting, but also enjoyable to be able to design like a whole factory and a whole new network architecture from the ground up, rather than coming in and having to like fix all of this legacy stuff and, you know, put the pieces of the puzzle together. Having the freedom to go and design something from the ground up how you want it to look, pretty enjoyable, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think had that not been the case, my last couple of years would have been an absolute nightmare just to unpick everything that's gone on before. But it's been really nice, and it's a real challenge. You know, what I never appreciate with a warehouse is you've got metal everywhere, you know, from the racks to the actual building itself is a Faraday cage. So, okay, everything stays in, but it also means nothing else gets in, like signal for mobile devices or you know, 5G to do data connections when you're building a network in the middle of nowhere on a building site in the middle of January. And it's been it was definitely a challenging experience, really positive. You know, one of the best things I think about working at Science in Sport was very much a can-do attitude. We've still got that startup mentality of, we need to do this, let's do it quick. The quicker we do it, the more benefit we get from it. Now it's just that, let's make sure we've got the ROI, let's make sure we recognize it and deliver it. And that was very much an interesting one with that building, because when I came in and looked at the IT budget for that warehouse, it was probably a quarter of what it needed to be. So there comes in the stakeholder management skills of okay, but you know, this is the challenge we've got. How do we look at things like a kind of minimal viable product to get things up and running, move it to a second year improvement activity? You know, initially we didn't do certain activities that we then brought online the next year, but there has to be the red lines. You know, security is a red line, we can't touch that. You know, it might be we put a quarter of the APs in we need and then put the rest in next year. There's always ways to play with it and try and save some money. But, you know, I'm very much red lines. There's some things I won't change. Security is one that we just can't mess with, you know.
Right. You can't compromise, right? Okay. The last element that I wanted to have or ask you a question about on that is cloud. So, you know, it's no surprise to me that cloud has come up in this conversation, because of course, everyone that I speak to is either moving to the cloud or is already in the cloud. So I asked this question to everyone, and the question is, why is it that cloud aspect for you and for your business? What are the key things that the cloud enables that means that everyone is using the cloud now?
I think there's two key elements. One is time and agility, so speed, really. I can add on something that I need like tomorrow rather than having to wait a week or get CapEx sign off to buy something else. There's that quick operational, let's test something, let's see if it works. We can always drop it afterwards or just use it during the day to test. That agility really works well. But I would say the main thing is the economy of scale. When we sat down and looked at the site, I did a cost analysis of if we wanted to get a new DR site to go alongside this new warehouse, and we wanted to go and do the same systems with the HA, with a proper fast disk array that we'd need to do what, because we could see the problems we were having, allow that to be scalable when we grow. It was, I think it was twice the amount to go on premise. Wow. And that was a 700 grand investment we'd have had to have done for a 3-year ROI, and it just didn't make any sense. So this route made a lot more sense. It's not ideal from a financial point of view, past IFRIC, we are seeing some challenges with our budgeting, but it's the right thing to do for the right reasons. And I mean, to give an example, our SAP server, we doubled the spec of what we had on premise, went live with it, everything was fine for a couple of months, but because it worked, more people used it, more people wanted to see it because they could see what it could do, which meant we had to double the capacity again, just to keep up the demand of our own staff, right, as well as increase throughput from the customers. So that allowed us to do that. That would have been another 150 grand investment just to do that, which we'd have to go through all that rigmarole of doing, where it was just a £500 a month increase. I think just loosely, obviously, but the benefits we can see, we still have to approve it, but it made such a big difference. So that's the real thing for me. There is a key, obviously, of picking and choosing the right clouds for the right activities. It's not always going to be the right one. AWS we've had to go into for a couple of Amazon specific requirements that we have with Channel Advisor and tools like that we're not able to get through any other tool. But then that integrates back into our key Azure environment.
Okay. So you've basically got people knocking on the door to use your SAP servers because they're so good and they're so efficient.
Well, absolutely.
No, but genuinely, that's a good illustration of the benefits, right? So I know you mentioned costs there, time, agility, and performance as well. So super interesting.
And being a retail business, well, November's always busy for us, and the ability to be able to ramp up and ramp down for a month at a time, it just removes that commitment that you need to have. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about then. It's a little bit of a cliche, and I get a bit awkward when I ask this question, right? But it's the what keeps you up at night as a head of IT question. So, tell me, what is it that thing on your mind that you just your head hits the pillow, and it's still there. What's that worry for you as the head of IT?
A year and a half ago, it was the servers. Before we got rid of this legacy kit and tech. Now, I think it's probably the user side of things, but maybe not for the reason you'd think. It's where we are a retail environment, we have to give a lot more access to certain areas than we'd like to. And because of the fact we're quite, I use the word entrepreneurial, the guys are very creative, which, it's got to be encouraged. But we will get things come out of the woodwork that's been just done without us knowing. Right. And I think that's the key, is the not knowing, that shadow IT that you just don't know about. And that might come down purely from logons, that if someone leaves, you can't recover, or it might come down to they've actually implemented a new system that doesn't integrate, and then you need to put it in place. So it's that, what do we not know that someone's done that tomorrow will be the most important thing in the business, that everything has to then drop for to do. And that's, it's trying to put those boundaries in place where we've got enough governance and capacity that we can process that the right way quickly, and are seen as enablers and not blockers. And I think that's been the historical challenge, where IT is seen as you're a blocker because you're saying no. And I think the change is, we're not saying no, we're going to say yes, but you have to do this first, or let's check this. It may be as simple as, are you certified in ISO 27001? It might be, have they got single sign-on? And that's a big one for me. Single sign-on all the way, make life easier, but it has to be done for the right reasons with a system that's secure.
Yeah. And so it's interesting to hear that, because previously what you mentioned is you love the cloud because you can spin up anything when you need it to. But
yeah.
the downside of that is now that it's solved one headache, but it's also playing on your mind in another aspect. And so it's interesting to see that as technology evolves, it's just a different challenge or a different downside that you have to protect against.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you do notice things come on, people come on the journey with you, but also these cloud providers are as well. You might log into Jira and it will say, well, do you want to take ownership of all of your email addresses? And it's like, well, I would, but I know if I do that, I'm going to break everything. So I need to do it properly. But there's other things around that, which it does help us. There's certainly awareness tools you can put in place in Microsoft 365 and other tools that will grab everything together. But the key really is getting the business on side, understanding what you do and why you do it. It is all about compliance. And the bigger we get, the more important that's going to become, because ultimately our customer data is critical. It is what people trust about us holding that. And you don't want people to say, oh, we don't want you to hold that anymore. We want to be able to talk to our customers and provide them the latest insights. So it's absolutely fundamental to make sure everything's secure.
Yeah. Okay. So Paul, Ross, interesting, super interesting so far, right? The next topic that we're going to talk about is one that always gets people smiling. So you, of course, as the head of IT, have a remit to bring new technology onto the business. And on the flip side to that, there are these vendors and these salespeople and these marketing people who have a remit to try and sell you that technology and, make you aware of all of that technology. And sometimes I think, those two motives come to loggerheads. So what I'd like to hear from you is, what's your perspective on how salespeople and how vendors approach you now versus how you wish that happened in the future?
Yes, and there definitely is a smile there, because that is a very emotive question, possibly. But
yeah,
I would say what is really difficult is when you're very busy and all you're getting is uncontextualized emails coming through that are maybe something you're not looking into at the moment, might be something you're looking into in the future. And that is you kind of feel rude, either ignoring it or just kind of going, oh, not today. But at the same time, when you are really busy, how do you sift through all of those?
Yeah.
I can go through my spam filter and there's loads in there. And then one might get through and I'm like, well, I didn't even know you'd emailed me before.
Yeah.
So it is tricky. The problem I find is it's about that relationship building, because if I've got something I'm interested in or looking for, I've got time to build the relationship because I need to move forward with that initiative. Whereas if it's not something that's on my plate today, I haven't got time to go back and start building a relationship for something I don't need today. So I guess the way I've done things for the last few years has really been around using my trusted network of partners. So we outsource a lot of our SIAM model. So we've got Azure managed service, we've got a help desk managed service. They overlay the Microsoft support as well. And we have a number of different partners around that do that, or historical. So when we're looking for something, we generally go to those guys early in our roadmap and say, this is what's coming. Have you got partners that you're working with that have these sort of tool sets? Because it does allow them to do some of the legwork for us, being completely honest. But it also means that whatever we introduce, we can support. And that's the key for me is it's pointless me bringing something in that I've got no skills in-house to support. If I can go for a reseller and then supports it afterwards, I've done half the work already.
Yeah.
So I would say generally, I would always prefer it to come through the reseller market as opposed to direct from the vendor.
Okay, so that's a really interesting point. So are you basically saying there that because you rely on these group of trusted partners, the resellers, so to speak, who basically act like a proxy between you and the technology provider, if a vendor was, proactively going via a reseller or one of those proxy, people that you have in the middle, that is a preferred way for them to get in contact with you. You know, you like to work through resellers. So if a vendor actually acknowledges that and goes that route, you know, that's something that you prefer.
I think so, yeah, because it streamlines what I'm looking to do. I think quite often you'll get a very niche product that's coming in that doesn't fit into my holistic view. You know, I will sit down at budget time and say, right, what did we succeed in this year? Did my roadmap hit? What's left over for next year? Look at my technical reference model and find out where my gaps are, you know, update that. And at that point, I'm looking to go out and find vendors to get budget costs for next year.
Yeah.
And at that point, I roughly will know the route we're going to go down to narrow it down to 3 or 4 vendors. You know, I've worked in areas before when I've like to take with ODU processes and, you know, those sort of procurement ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really interesting because then you can just spread to everybody. Everyone can submit, but it's much easier there because you've got your request forms or you've got your procurement plans. And that allows you then to see hundreds of vendors if you need to. The struggle is if you haven't got a procurement team or a very small procurement team, very small IT team, you don't really have the time to go out and speak to 50 vendors. You need that done for you where someone can say, well, I've used this, we can support it, we understand it.
Okay. And so let's say that, you know, there is something that gets through the spam filter and they're not going via the reseller, and, you know, someone is trying to contact you directly. What are those things that you actually find valuable or that catch your eye from that email, or whether it's a cold call or whatever medium? What are those things that actually you think, you know what, that actually did catch my eye, or that approach was helpful? What are those kinds of things?
I think the key bit is visualization within the email. Attachments I very rarely will click. You know, phishing with me, I just kind of ignore it. If I don't expect it, it's gone.
Yeah.
If you're sending links, same thing. You know, very rarely will I click a link. If you're showing me an image of what can be done, that I can see useful. And again, if it's looking more of a holistic view of technology, I'm going to find that more useful. If we're looking at a niche product that might fit one tiny element, well, actually, I'd rather 2 or 3 other products that do 80% together across the holistic view of things. Okay. So I think for me, it would be that visualization of this is where it fits, say, with O365 or with whatever else it might be that we potentially might be using.
Okay. So some actual explanation of what, you know, where that product sits within or potentially sits within your architecture. And when you say visualization, do you actually mean maybe a diagram which is inserted within an email and like shows from an architectural perspective?
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, I think if you've got an image there that's even one of the ones that's in a PowerPoint, you know, or it's in a presentation, I'm not going to click on links or attachments if I'm not expecting them. You know, that is my phishing training. That's what I tell people not to do. So if I can see a graphic, it means I haven't got to go somewhere else to find the information.
Okay. So that's super interesting. I've not heard that before. The other thing that I picked up on, and I did remember to ask you this because we spoke about it previously, was the spam filtering. So there's probably people watching this, right, who are sending out blanket emails quite often, and they're expecting that those blanket emails are, you know, if they send out 100 emails, they expect that 100 emails will get through to the person, the intended recipient. How does a spam filter actually work in terms of sales and marketing emails? Like how do you configure that filter to recognize something like that?
I think it depends. I mean, the way we've done it, we've been quite strict. You know, we've put our SPF score quite low, our spam score quite low, so that we don't get bothered by a lot of this. And it's interesting. We use a product on our like an add-on, so it does a little bit of our AI to understand what sort of terminology it is, if you've seen this sort of email before. And if you have, then it will maybe let it through. If you haven't, then it'll go, well, maybe I'll put that into the spam and they can look at it if they want to, like quarantine it. And what I've seen since we've made that change about a year ago is a lot of sales stuff is getting caught in the quarantine, which means I don't even go into those messages if I'm not expecting them. You know, I might get 50 a day that I'm going through my spam filter that I'm just going, no, because I've got no context. And, I do attend shows like the tech show last week at the Excel, because that's where I'm going to go if I'm looking for something. And they're the people I might then expect comms back from. And I think, how do you configure that? The tools are out the box now, and they've been locked down further. I think a lot of CRM products will tell you if it's been delivered or not, all the way through to the mailbox if it's been clicked. So I think there will be a visibility of if that's happened or not. But I think it's certainly, from my perspective and my colleagues I was talking to today, to kind of go, do you agree with this?
Yeah.
It's very much, I will only open something I'm expecting now. And it's kind of we've been burnt so many times that you just kind of avoid it if you can.
And that comment that you made there, you'd only open something if you expect it. Is that because you just don't want to bother reading a sales email, or is that because of maybe the cybersecurity risk which is associated with something that you don't recognize?
It's both, but it's more so probably the cybersecurity side of things.
Okay.
There are a lot of people masquerading as people they shouldn't be. We do watch people knock on the door. We can see the different types of emails, and some of them have been purporting to be from our supply chain, purporting to be from our vendors, etc. So we absolutely will be cautious on what we're opening. And I think it's probably 70% cybersecurity, 30% I don't have time to look at these messages.
Okay. So this has been super interesting, and I've just got one final question on this topic, Ross, to ask you. So a lot of the people that I speak to when we talk about this topic, they say that they rely heavily on their peer network. And when I mean peer network, that can be anything from like your Gartners, professional services, professional advisory bodies, all the way down to like ex-colleagues that they work with, or maybe they have a WhatsApp group, or there's like the CIO network. Are you doing things similar to that? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm investigating a new requirement, so last year we were looking at a cybersecurity program, we built out ready to do uplifts. The first thing we did was speak to our partner network, was to get them to give us some ideas. One of them did a free essentially gap analysis for us to see where we were. They recommended some tools. We went to other partners looking at specific requirements. Again, people we've worked with before, reached out to people we've used before. And Gartner for me is a key bit, just to get that kind of, are we in the right ballpark?
Yeah.
We are not a bank, so therefore I'm not going to be looking at the top end security products.
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking at the ones that hit the right sort of medium low risk of what we are. So I think Gartner is key for me, but you're right, peer networks, absolutely. If I see something I know someone else has used, I will reach out and say, is that still as good as it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago? Yeah. LinkedIn is probably the way I will do that generally, unless it's someone I'm still in contact with regularly. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Super interesting. And that chimes a chord with a lot of the things that I've heard, right? Is people in positions of like yourself will most certainly rather speak to an advisory or a past colleague rather than reaching out directly to a vendor first. They'd rather have that trusted opinion. And maybe the conversation with the vendor will come at a later point. Is that what I'm hearing?
Pretty much, yeah. There have been a couple of times we have gone direct if there's a specific tool that we've gone, that looks really cool. But that is probably less frequent. But as a general rule, yeah, absolutely use your trusted network.
Sure. Okay. Well, Ross, I'm not going to take up any more of your time this evening, but
it's been great.
I will finish this with saying thank you so much for spending some time with me and for sharing your insights. It's always super enjoyable for me to do this, and great when there's amazing insights that come out of it as well. So I'd like to say thank you and appreciate your time. That was really useful.
No problem. I had a great time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.